The National Police Commissioner, General Afani Masemola, revealed that he did not agree with the decision to disband the Special Crime Fighting Unit, which was made through a directive from the suspended Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. He was giving evidence on the first day of his testimony before Parliament's ad hoc committee looking into police corruption and interference. Masemola told the ad hoc committee that he didn't know the reasons behind the directive to disband it. For more, we're joined by Principal Associate at the Africa Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis, Eldred de Klerk. Eldred, you and I ventilated that particular point when it came to the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. So I want to just go to some of and we've always made the point that this is not about looking at what's happening only in a building or an institution. It's about what's happening on the periphery or on the outside perimeter as well. And what was happening on the outside perimeter yesterday were some very dramatic raids connected to corruption at the Tembisa Hospital. But we know that some of those players form part of this network of connectedness that we're hearing about from Mkhwanazi and from Masemola, as well as the raids on Shadrack Sibiya's home. So I just love your thoughts on the activities that we're seeing happening outside Nhlanhla Commission and the ad hoc committee.
Good morning, Iman, and good morning to the crew. Thank you very much. What we're learning too is that when you leave a police officer suspicious, they're going to start sniffing. And what they've done, given the fact that they didn't understand what was happening with with the directive that basically sought to halt and stop their investigations into political killings, they then went sniffing. They went to start looking at what the reasons could be. And when they went and raided, found arms and then found cell phones that led them down a course of inquiry, they started connecting the dots. And this is where we get the vivid picture of the big five. So we went from our big five in our wilderness and conservation realm to the small five in the Western Cape, and now the big five when it comes to corruption and subversion of the state. So when all the witnesses said to us that we can expect action to happen very soon because they are somewhere down the road in their investigations where they get ready to act. And they sent out a chilling warning, naming individuals who they were now ready to act against. They were also doing so because they're acutely aware that they have to restore some confidence in the ability of our essential public service entities like the South African police and the justice system, that it's working, that they're on top of their game, that no matter what the efforts of others to thwart them, they will continue their investigations.
The concerns, though, Eldred, were expressed by Cedric Nkabinde and Shadrack Sibiya both yesterday, and it's interesting how they mirror each other. Shadrack Sibiya really took this personally. He said that he felt betrayed by Afani Masemola, whom he said, the last time they were together, things were okay. He also fears for his life. What he was also worried about was the seizure of his electronic gadgets. Information contained therein is going to be very helpful to him, he said, in his testimony to the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry and the ad hoc committee, echoed by Cedric Nkabinde as well, who had his digital devices taken away. They're both worried about the integrity of the information that's concerned therein. In Cedric Nkabinde's case, he said when there was a show of force on an apartment that was associated with him, his brother was there, who was then assaulted by the members of the task force or the team that went to carry out and execute the order, which his brother said he didn't see even though he asked for it. But the fact was that on the assumption that it was him, he was still assaulted, saying that they believed it was him. So in fact, it was like him being assaulted. What do you make of how those raids were carried out yesterday against these two individuals?
Well, to me, it shows that level of anxiety from those who have been peddling the narrative that these folks are, in fact, those that are undermining the effectiveness and the functioning of the South African police services. So we're starting to get lines being drawn in the sand. It's unfortunate, though, that what we're seeing is almost a FBI US style going after perps in inverted commas. And yet we have a constitution that says that how the state deals with us, they always have to try to maintain and enhance our dignity. That, yes, they can curtail our civil liberties, but in doing so, they mustn't destroy us as human beings, as people. So people may call me touchy-feely, left, rights-based activist, but I do think that policing should be based on rights, because we do want a professional police service that upholds the law and doesn't and respects the law. So as much as you can justify in a court of law why you think you needed to take that actions, you still have to explain it, and you still have to try to avoid that you put your officers in that situation where they use violence when it's not proportional and it's not necessary.
So I think this question is germane and flows out of what you have just described to us. When we look at both of those police raids, the question will become, given this heightened political context now that we are in, and which has been invoked repeatedly at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry and the ad hoc committee, is whether we are seeing operational decisions, the very things that Mkhwanazi and Masemola are pushing back on. Are they being used as political weapons from your perspective? From a security governance standpoint, how should we be interpreting these operations? Are they legitimate law enforcement operations or retaliatory tactics in what we have described before as ongoing factional battles?
Well, on the face of it, and given the right to your question earlier on, where you take away somebody's ability to defend themselves and to prove their own case, it can be looked at and be seen to be retaliatory. And some of our fellow citizens will definitely think of it as that. The timing of it is also something that has been called into question. And the particular targets and these individuals are preparing themselves, as you've already said, to go to Nhlanhla and to come to the ad hoc committee. It is unfortunate that narrative will dominate for the time being. So we now have to see what the next steps are. Yes, they haven't been arrested, but have their ability to defend themselves been undermined? They are both lawyered up. Their lawyers now have to put the case, maybe in a court of law, or at least to the commissioners or their committee, that they need access to the very exhibits that will prove their particular story. And if that's not granted to them, then that actually is not fair procedural justice, it's not fair in terms of their ability to defend themselves, and it can undermine the very foundations of what the commission and the ad hoc committee then finds.
What is your observation about the languaging on Senzo Mkhunu, Eldred? So for me, there's just an interesting softening that seems to be emerging between Mkhwanazi's testimony and what Masemola is saying. In terms of Mkhwanazi, that was related to the signing of the disbanding letter, and how much did he really know? Did he know what he was signing? Those sorts of things, as opposed to somebody who was intentional on top of it and who was a catalytic force in issuing instructions and directives for the disbanding of the PKTT. Then you have Masemola in talking about the 360 million rand SAPS contract. This is the controversial Medicare contract, Medicare 24 contract, with Kat Matlala as the key player there. When he was talking about it, he was essentially saying, this is something Mkhunu also wanted to have a discussion about. There were concerns that he had also, and I'm paraphrasing here, had relayed about this particular contract. That doesn't sound like someone who is in bed with someone, stands to gain from someone, and is trying to subvert an investigation into that individual. Promoting a meeting that he and Masemola had. I mean, again, I speak under correction. I'm paraphrasing that. This is just an observation, and you may disagree with what I've just said. But what are your thoughts?
Well, it has been interesting because all the way through Nhlanhla Commission, including Van Rooyen's testimony, Mkhwanazi's testimony, and Masemola's testimony, they had this whole narrative around directives, instructions, strategic policy, operational directives. Now it just seems to be that the National Commissioner accepts that the minister can give directions. His only reservation was the urgency and the timing of it, and that it needed to be done immediately. Then we get to the case that, as you just explained, that it was initially said that the minister wanted to talk about it, but we also heard is that the minister wanted to be investigated. So it would be a little concerning if the minister was instituting an investigation where he was going to be a suspect and or may be found to be complicit in the basically the corruption that was happening when it came to that particular tender. So there seemed to be a shifting of the narratives, because we've always said that, or softening, as you rightfully pointed out, we've always said that there's many sides to the story, and we haven't heard the other sides. And I think that as astute police officers, they must be aware and already started to think, what could be the minister defense? What have they found in real times in terms of evidence? What can they prove? And what do they know about the defense of the others, including the minister who's now on suspension? So we have to watch the playing field and see how this unfolds.
And it sounds like also keeping opinions in check and adopting a policeman's investigative brain and methodology in how we appraise what we are hearing and what we are being told. I want to play this before I ask you about what's next.
There are problems. We happen to have find what is the problem in terms of infiltration into SAPS, and we are dealing with it. And I think it happens to any organization in the world. I think we are better off because we caught this thing right at the beginning when it started, where some cartels or drug cartels would want to take over or infiltrate the SAPS and destroy the organizations.
The old adage again, which we've used before, Eldred, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Things are coming out into the light. Hearing Masemola talk about infiltration there, how deep do you believe it goes, and who continues to benefit from it? We have this opportunity now to kind of, make our first leap into unraveling this web of patronage and benefit. But from your perspective, is this just the tip of the iceberg?
I would venture to say yes, it is. And I look at the history of the South African Police Service. I look at the history of national commissioners to date. Unfortunately, I look at the accusations leveled at senior police officers. I look at the exits of senior police officers across the board. And I look at efforts to want to both flatten the structure, institute lifestyle audits, which now Mkhwanazi is finally, he was part of the panel of experts, so he knows exactly what our call was for lifestyle integrity and competency audits. He wants those to be made public. So this thing has been, and also the National Development Plan 2030, written way back, calls for this exact thing, because there was already concerns then that we were dealing with individuals, but also a systemic issue where ethics was being undermined by culture, and culture was looking to enrich initially, as it's been said, political entities, but now to enrich individuals, and that was concerning. So this is nothing new, unfortunately, and it is something that we've been living with. It's now good, as you say, that we have it in the light. My only concern is that we're talking to the very people who are tasked with leading the institution, and I balk every time I hear the South African Police Service being spoken about as an organization. It's an institution. It's supposed to have norms and values. It's supposed to have an institutional culture. It has an institutional culture. That's supposed to have an institutional memory, and it has a authoritative structure, for example. So we're speaking to the very people who were tasked with leading this. When did they know? What did they do? And is this the remedy that they seek through the Nhlanhla Commission and the Ad Commission? It's definitely true for Mkhwanazi. He says he was at his wit's end, and he needed to do what he did.